Hey guys, this is the beginner's guide to raising goats. So the first question you gotta ask yourself, what is your purpose for raising goats? Do you want to make milk and cheese, yogurt? Are you going more on the meat route? Meat goats? Are you going weed control? Really it depends what you're doing to select your breed. So once you get your breed selected, do some research, figure out what state you're in, which goats work best. If you're showing goats, then boar's probably what you want to go with. For dairy, you want to go with Saanen, Alpine, Nubian, something like that. Brush clearing, Kikos, and Spanish goats work really well for meat. Kiko and Spanish are meat goats, as well as boars, Savannahs. There's all sorts of breeds of goats for whatever kind of operation you want to run. So the first thing you want to think about is fencing. Fencing is one of the most important pieces when raising goats. A terrible fence, and it's going to cause you a lot of headache. So don't be shy when you're picking out your fence. A 5-strand barbed wire fence, it's probably not going to work at all. I recommend either a net wire fence with a hot wire to keep the goats off the fence, or a wooden fence. So have your like a 1x12 at the bottom, and then a 4-inch gap, and then a 1x6, and just go up as your gaps get larger. Net wiring, when you're doing net wiring fences, don't be afraid to get the little more expensive net wire. Just make sure it's strong. Stretch that fence. So goats are really curious animals. So if they find a hole and you fix it, that hole's not going to be as near as strong as if you fix it before they found it, because they know where the weak spot in the fence is, and they'll always go there first to get out. Okay? Next is shelter. When having shelter for your goats, you just need something to keep them out of the weather. If you're in the South, Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, you probably don't need as much shelter as you do in Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, Washington, where there's quite a bit more snow and cold weather. But you still want to have some sort of shelter. Shelter, pretty simple. You can do a lean-to, a barn, a little hutch. Here are some examples. So make sure you have a good shelter. Now when feeding your animals, feed is another great important thing. During the winter, most likely you're going to feed hay. Alfalfa hay. Make sure you have really good high quality hay. You really want your goats to be able to process the nutrients in that and benefit off of that, especially during breeding season and late gestation. When they're developing that kid, they really need that nutrition and nutrients to help grow that baby and provide milk. Okay, for the summertime, most likely you're going to have your goats on pasture or out doing weed control. So when you're doing that and setting up your pasture, you want to make sure you have a mixture of plants, vegetation, shrubs, and bushes. Goats are browsers, not grazers. So they're going to look around and eat the shrubs. The things that cows don't eat, the goats will eat first. That's why cows and goats are such good coat grazers, because they eat what one another won't. Goats will also eat the bark off trees as well as the lower hanging branches. So if you have any fruit trees that you don't want your goats getting into, I would really make sure that fence is nice and strong. So just see where you are, what state you're in, your climate, and figure out which type of pasture mixture will work best for you. A really important thing is water. You must have good, clean water. Goats won't want to eat your nasty, filthy water. If you have a pond on your property, good. But always still have some fresh water troughs in your shelters, in your pens, in your barns. Wherever those goats are going to be, you want to have fresh, clean water there. One way you can keep that water trough full all the time is a float. You can get little floats that go on the edge of your water trough, and then you screw a hose into them, and you just leave the faucet on 24/7. Those are all right. They definitely help. Another way automated water you can get are Ritchie waters. I personally have a Ritchie water 150S, so it's got a sloped roof for when the kids are jumping on it. It works great. So make sure they always have clean, fresh water that they can access. We're going to talk about a little of an untouched subject that most people don't realize is stress. Stress is a huge key when raising livestock. Stress lowers their growing ability, their milk production, their overall happiness and health. They're more immune to get diseases and sick when they're stressed. And some ways to lower stress is always have that clean water, always have good feed for them. And then when you're weaning your goats, do fence line weaning. Again, gotta have a good fence. Fence line weaning, so your fence will be down the middle. You'll have your does on one side and your kids on the other. That way it doesn't put as much pressure on them because they're still right there. They can talk to each other, but they're not gonna be getting that milk and they're gonna be able to be weaned. Also, another when you're stressing is when you're working your goats. And when you're working your goats, you need to be as quiet and as calm as possible. No yelling, no electric probes, no hot shots, just calm. They have a flight zone, a 45-degree angle out from the side of their eye. That's their flight zone. You come close enough right there, it'll put pressure on them and push them forward lightly. You could also use a rattle paddle if you like. I prefer just use the flight zone, calm, easy, simple. Want to be really unstressed on those animals. Another thing, when you get goats, get more than one. I would say probably maybe a minimum of 3, 5, 10, all the ways up to as many as you can want. Goats are a herd animal, so they like to have friends. They like to be around more goats. They want those. So make sure you get more than one goat when purchasing goats. So for medical on your goats, you're going to have parasites and runny noses as well as runs and diarrhea. So make sure you have some of that stuff on hand. Talk to your vet. Get a good relationship going with your vet. You really want to be one with them and have a good relationship with your vet. So if you ever need anything for one of your goats, you have a question, you can call him. He can come out and check it on. And some medicines are, so there's not very many vaccines for goats, but you can get extra label vaccines for goats, which are not prescribed for goats, but with a vet's permission and signature, you can get those, but they have to have a client-vet relationship, so he's got to be with your animals and worked with you for a minute to get you those extra labels if you ever need them. Another thing we need to talk about is predator control. Predator control is a big thing depending where you are. You have hogs, wolves, coyotes, mountain lions, bears, eagles, all can snatch your kids. So eagles, you probably can't do much for them. Talk to Fish and Game if you really have that big eagle problem. But for the other predators, you can have Great Pyrenees, like this one here, or you can have, which is a type of guard dog. You can also have German Shepherds, guard donkeys, and llamas, which I'll have a video coming out in these coming months about guard llamas and guard donkeys. But if you do have a guard donkey, you want a female as well as you only want one, because if you have too many donkeys with your goats, then they'll bond more with the donkeys than the goats, and they won't have a stronger relationship, and they'll kind of become workless, and they'll be more of a donkey than a guard donkey. You can also put tripwires around your perimeter of your fence or property to stop animals from coming in. What a tripwire does, it's a hot electrical wire that you set up about 4 to 10 feet out from your fence, up by about 12 centimeters, just so when they walk by, it'll zap them and they'll know to stay out of the area. You can also snare them, trap them. Just make sure you have either a guard dog, guard llama, guard donkey, whatever works best for you for predator control. Another thing is working systems. Goats are so little, you don't really need a large, fancy working system like for cattle and cows. But if you have a high number of goats, you may want one. But if you have a lower number, you can just have a holding pen or a catch pen that you push your goats in, and you have your kids or you yourself pick up the kids when castrating, tagging, banding, whatever, or you can do it in the jug. So just make sure you have a way to work those animals when you're giving vaccines. Be stressed, be nice with them, bond with your goats quite a bit. If you leave a goat out in the pasture, just let it do its thing for a while. they'll become more stressed when you work on because they haven't had as much contact with humans. So make sure you're out there bonding with your goats, checking on them every day. Another thing is do your research. For example, you're watching this video, talk to people in your area, get some on-farm visits, and just go talk to people. If you want to learn about the Kiko goat breed, go find a Kiko goat farm, go visit, go talk to the guy, see what you need to do, see what you need to learn. And if you're doing a dairy, go visit a goat dairy, go learn how to make cheese. So just make sure you learn and understand what you're getting into before you just say, hey, I'm going to go get a goat dairy and go buy some goats. Just no. Another thing is when you're getting your goats, I don't recommend getting them from a sale barn because sale barns have such a variety of different goats coming in and animals coming out at different times, and they're more prone to get diseases because they're not quarantined when they bring the animals in. They're bringing them all in, running them through. So go find that like Kiko Goat Farm and talk to them, see if they have any nannies or does or yearlings that they're culling off or selling. See if you can get a hold of any of those. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out on our Instagram page or go to our website, notesongoats.com. Message us there. We got an article there. We got some more about goat breeds. There's all sorts of information there. Go check that out. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Good luck with your